I get a message from Jeff saying, have you seen this? Ian Rapoport saying that they're going to franchise tag Geno Smith if needs be. And I'm sat there thinking, why does this report exist? Like, why is it out being said? Because even if you believe that, why are you putting that out there? Why would the Seahawks volunteer that information now? I mean, if you're saying, okay, Geno, we'll have you next year, even if that means we have to franchise tag you, his people will say, thanks very much. So now the bidding starts at $30 million a year. Because if you won't sign us to anything less, you're just going to tag us anyway. So what you mean? There's no benefit. I mean, Ian Rapoport can only have got that from the Seahawks, and yet, what's the benefit in saying that? Like, if you wanted to try and get him for, like, what if the market, you find out the combine ain't that great for Geno Smith? Let's just say, and you could get him for 18 or 20 or 25. Well, you can't now because he'll just say, no, we're not accepting that. Franchise taggers, or let us hit the market. Like, I didn't understand why that existed. And also, equally, I'm wondering, why is there such a few days ago, Brady Henderson reported an article from, he reported an article on ESPN saying that the Seahawks think that they've got a QB-friendly scheme, and actually they can find alternatives on the cheap. Which then I started thinking, like, is Brady talking to John Schneider and Ian Rapoport talking to Pete Carroll or something here? Like, are they not on the same page? Because this is contradictory information here. And I'm confused by it all. And then the other angle to this, guys, is if you franchise Geno Smith, that's your cap space gone. You will be minus 1.5 million in the red if you franchise tag him. So if you franchise tag him, you have to extend his contract beyond what the franchise tag to lower the cap hit this year, so that you've actually got some money to spend to fill out your roster. Because right now you've got 36 contracted players for next year. So you are saying, we're going to have you at 30 million, and we will pay you no less than 30 million for the next 2 or 3 years as well, because we need to lower the cap hit. So you're committing to Geno Smith for 30 million a year for at least 2 years, maybe 3, maybe 4. And on top of that, guys, if you lower the cap hit from 30 million this year to keep it as a 30 million average, that means the cap hit next year might be 40 million, 45 million. How are you living with a cap hit of 45 million for Geno Smith based on what he's shown since Germany? None of this makes any sense. None of it makes any sense, guys. Robbie, help me out.
They're not franchising Geno Smith. There, I'll help you out.
Ian Rapoport says they are.
I don't care what he said. We don't have the money to. You just said it yourself. It doesn't make any damn sense. It wouldn't make sense financially. They're not going to franchise him. Even Geno said he was going to test the free agent market. I think he knows kind of what's coming, and I think there's a reason why he's been so emotional after the games and the looks he's had. I think there's a reason why he knows this could be his time in Seattle, unless something catastrophic happens. He's not going to get the deal that he wants, and then he has to come back to Seattle for cheaper. But here, I'm going to just touch back to the game a little bit, and I was super frustrated with this fumble, and I know fumbles happen, but in that position at that time, protecting the football is key, right? And so the fact that he didn't was very, very frustrating. But what I had a problem with the most is we came out from the second half and we had a 17-16 lead. We had the football, and it was 3rd and 8, and Geno audibled to a draw play. That lit me on fire, because I'm like, go out there and be the man. Don't audible to a freaking draw play. I don't care what you saw. There's no way that was going to work, right? And so I think for me, those are the kind of things that drive me nuts.
That was playing scared there.
Exactly. And I don't know if that was Pete in his headset saying, run the rock or whatever, but I saw him
the headset switches off. The headset switches off.
He was audible. So he audibled out of that.
He
made a big deal out of it, and I thought it was terrible. So, yeah, I mean, rest easy. He's not getting franchise tag. If he does, then I mean, kiss the next season over as well, because we don't have any cap space. We can't sign anybody.
Well, that's the thing. To me, you the only reason that you would franchise him is because you're going to sign him to a long-term contract, and you just want to make sure that he's not somewhere else while you have those negotiations. That's the only reason to do it. But the idea of, I mean, let me ask you this question, Adam. Do you think Seattle will win the Super Bowl with Geno Smith earning that amount of money? and you just invest your draft picks into the defense. Because ultimately, what that Ian Rapoport reports, which is not easy to say, is saying is that is, if you just take his report on face value, that's a plan that somebody has within the Seahawks franchise.
I don't, but I also don't think that the Seahawks would win the Super Bowl if Geno Smith won the Powerball and said, actually, I don't need a salary this year. I'll play for free. Like, he's not a championship winning quarterback. And I don't think this is this great slight on him to say that. You know, the fact that he's managed to do this to his career is incredible. And I hope that this gives him a terrific legacy in the city or wherever he wants to go next. But he's not going to win you a Super Bowl as a quarterback. And so if they want to keep him on as a placeholder because they've drafted someone for this year that they think maybe in 2024 or whatever it is will be the guy, I'm totally fine with that. And yeah, but the idea of a franchise tag from a financial point of view would almost suggest to me that it's almost like a surrender from Pete, really, isn't it? That they're going to maybe cut a couple of older guys to create some space. Geno will be a placeholder. And it's all, I don't know, am I reading this wrong? But it would strike me as a way that it would kind of be a really nice defense, like safety blanket for Pete, because he's basically saying to the owners, look, I'm going to cut a load of old money, have Geno as a placeholder, and then we'll go again in 2024, 25.
Well, I was chatting to somebody and I said to them the point that I've made to you guys about financially, it doesn't make sense unless you're going to extend his contract for multiple years and then you are committed to Geno Smith for many years at the kind of salary that Russell Wilson was earning before he was traded, which is, 30 to 35 million type thing. And if you lower the cap hit this year, then, you could be talking like 40 million, 45 million cap hit in future years, which could be difficult to get out of or could lump you with a load of dead money, which is Seattle's speciality. They always seem to find a way to get some dead money into the equation. And he said, well, it's okay. You can cut certain players to create more. But my counter to that would have been, that's fine. But who are you cutting? Because the players that you cut need to be replaced. You only have 36 players signed. So, okay, you could cut Quandre Diggs as a post-June 1st cut, take on the dead cap hit and say you're going to move on from Quandre Diggs. That's fine. Quandre Diggs doesn't deserve an $18 million cap hit next year anyway. But Quandre Diggs needs to be replaced. If you cut Shelby Harris, he will need to be replaced. If you cut Al Woods, he will need to be replaced. You can go through these options. The players that go, you don't have ready-made players to just step up there and come in. You need to have actual players to come in. So I don't think it works like that. And I was just confused. And look, I've got a bunch of super chats to get to. Really appreciate those guys. So I'm going to come to those as quickly as I can. But I want to read this quote to you because this is what I mean about contradictory quotes, guys. And I think this is really interesting. You've got Ian Rapoport saying, Geno Smith's going to be back whatever happens. But then in the Brady Henderson article that I mentioned earlier, I've got the exact quote here. I've brought it up. This is what it said. The Seahawks, meanwhile, no doubt want to re-sign their Pro Bowl quarterback, but they have an offensive system they believe to be QB friendly. They also believe there are potentially viable alternatives on more affordable contracts should Smith's asking price get too high for their liking. Now, that isn't, in my opinion, as in Brady Henderson, this is what I think they're thinking. This, when he says they believe that they have an offensive system that is QB friendly, they believe there are potentially viable alternatives on more affordable contracts. That's a sourced report. That has come from somebody in the Seahawks who has passed that on. He's relaying what has been said to him. So that's what I don't get. Who is telling Ian Rapoport Geno's back in 2023? And who is telling Brady Henderson, well, if his price goes too high, we'll sign somebody else like Sam Darnold or Drew Lock or Cooper Rush or one of these other guys that are cheaper or maybe draft somebody. It doesn't make any sense. And I've debated this on the blog a little bit. I wrote an article, I think, on Thursday saying, are Pete and John on the same page for this offseason? And then I wrote a counter saying, here's the evidence that they may be on the same page. So I looked at it from both angles. But Robbie, I'm wondering, are they on the same page? Are the people in that building who sort of think, Geno, got to keep him, are going to keep him, not even a question. And then is there a GM thinking, well, actually, I've got to build a roster here and I've got to make this work financially and I've got these picks and I don't agree with you, head coach. And is that going to be an issue? What do you think?
Well, we debated this a little bit last year before the draft too. Like, who's actually in charge? What actually happened in that, sit down meeting that they had with Jody Allen, and then all of a sudden it was like some kind of rumblings came out that Snyder had more say in the draft, and Pete would be more focused on the players. So I mean, it's very possible that it's John making those picks, and his contract actually goes 1 year longer than Pete's does. So maybe there's a reason behind that. I think John's in charge. I mean, honestly, I think he's probably the one making the decisions. I think Pete still has a strong say in the building, though. I don't think it's just John's way or nothing. So I think they try to sit down and probably talk about it. And I think there could be the real puzzle. And I've seen people saying it kind of here in the chat a lot about they may be just saying that. And Pete did say he thinks that they had 2 number ones, and there's a possibility they could think that they could bring back Locke and have him be the guy for the year and still draft a quarterback. I don't know what they're thinking, man. This is going to be a very weird up to the draft kind of see what happens things, and just seeing what people are saying. Like, I mean, I agree. I think Pete's probably the bigger problem in the whole situation, and I think it's just time for him to go. Unfortunately, I've been saying it for a few years now, but I just think it's time for a new regime to come over and take over.
I think we'll get on to sort of Pete's future in a minute. I think with Geno, the only thing I could think of was that maybe the reason that report surfaced today is that perhaps Geno Smith maybe it was worrying him a little bit this week, like, because as you mentioned earlier, he was quite emotional after the last game, maybe thinking it was his last game, and maybe they thought it was affecting him. That he was thinking, I've got to go out and prove something, or I'm a bit worried about what the future holds. And maybe they thought that was just a way to reassure him before the game, was to have Ian Rapoport say, oh, he's going to be back. And I don't know, maybe somebody convenient goes, hey, Geno, look at this, and throws a phone in his face before the game. But even that seems like, that's very, very speculative. That
they do a lot of this negotiating through the media kind of thing. Yes, they did it a lot with Russ too, and it's really confusing. So it's hard to take it at face value.
It's not so much confusing; it's blatantly obvious when they do it. I mean, and I think that Brady Henderson was a bit of negotiating through the media, like, oh, we can find cheaper options. So if the price goes too high, then yeah. And look, I think Geno's a good quarterback for Seattle as a bridge. I think he could be a decent bridge to a younger quarterback, but tying yourself down to the future and thinking that he's going to lead you to the promised land, I think, is wishful thinking. Adam, have you got? I mean, it's a confusing situation. What do you think?
Can we just not do the Geno hater stuff that I've just seen in the comments? Like, no one is a Geno hater. We're Seahawks lovers, fans, and that everything we're doing is through the spectrum of wanting the Seahawks to be better. I was certainly a Geno skeptic before the start of the season, and it's been a wonderful story to watch him play, but no one's a Geno hater, and I think we can do better than that.